Los Angeles International Airport was always a symphony of movement. Rolling suitcases, murmured announcements, the distant hum of aircraft taking off into the sky. It was organized chaos, an impersonal space where people rushed past each other, their lives intersecting for fleeting moments before continuing their separate journeys. At Gate 32A, however, the world had come to a halt. Ava and Maya Carter stood frozen, their elegant outfits now wrinkled under the weight of 1,000 stares. Moments ago, they had been two young women excited for their flight to New York, another seamless trip in a life of privilege. Now, they were trapped in a nightmare they couldn't comprehend. Lisa Reynolds, a middle-aged flight attendant with sharp, assessing eyes, held two torn boarding passes in her hand, the shredded paper fluttering slightly as if mocking the silence that followed. The sisters stared in disbelief, processing the moment in slow motion. "You're not getting on this plane," Lisa said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Maya was the first to snap out of it. "Excuse me," she said, her voice unsteady with shock. What the hell did you just do?" Lisa's expression remained cold, professional. "These tickets are fraudulent," she said. "We can't allow unauthorized passengers on a first-class flight." Ava took a step forward, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Fraudulent?" Her voice wavered between disbelief and outrage. "Are you serious? Do you even know who we are?" Lisa folded her arms. "I don't care who you are. If you don't have legitimate tickets, you don't board." Maya scoffed. "Legitimate? You saw us check in. We went through security. You think we faked all of that?" Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line, as if she was enjoying their desperation. Around them, passengers whispered, some watching with fascination, others shifting awkwardly. The scene was unfolding like a public execution, and Lisa stood tall, the executioner. "I'm calling security," she said flatly. Ava's stomach lurched. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was an insult. Maya, always the more impulsive twin, pulled out her phone. "Fine," she said, unlocking the screen. "I hope you enjoy being famous." Lisa frowned. "Put that away." Maya hit record. "To everyone watching this," she said, her voice dripping with controlled fury, "this is Lisa Reynolds, a flight attendant for Skyway Airlines. She just tore up our first-class tickets and accused us of fraud." "And why?" "Because we're two young black women traveling alone." The whispers escalated into gasps. Lisa's face flickered with something. Hesitation? No, it was anger. She reached out as if to grab the phone, but Maya stepped back. "You can't do this," Lisa snapped. "But you can." Maya shot back. "You just humiliated us in front of an entire airport, and you think I won't record it?" The moment spiraled further. A security guard arrived, a tall man with a stern expression, his presence making the tension unbearable. He assessed the situation quickly, then turned to Lisa. "What's the issue here?" he asked. Lisa squared her shoulders. These two young women attempted to board with fake tickets. Ava couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mouth opened and closed, her mind scrambling for a response. The injustice was suffocating. The guard looked at the twins. "Do you have any proof that the tickets were legitimate?" Maya gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, we did. Until she shredded them in front of us." Ava, her fingers shaking, opened her email. "Here," she said, thrusting her phone forward, her father's name clear in the reservation confirmation. "Ava and Maya Carter. First class. Paid in full." Lisa's expression hardened. The security guard's eyes flickered between the phone and Lisa, uncertainty creeping into his face. The tide of public perception was shifting, and Lisa could feel it. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "That doesn't mean anything," she snapped. "People forge confirmations all the time." Maya sucked in a breath, her face a mask of disbelief. This woman was willing to die on this hill. Ava tried again, her voice cracking. "Call your supervisor. Call someone from ticketing. Check the system." Lisa didn't move. She didn't want to check. A Skyway Airlines supervisor finally arrived, a man in a neatly pressed suit, confusion evident on his face. "What's the problem here?" Lisa beat everyone to the answer. "These two young women presented fraudulent tickets. I denied them boarding." The supervisor blinked. Then, slowly, turned to Ava and Maya. Names. Ava and Maya Carter, Maya said, her voice dangerously calm. He typed something into his tablet. His eyes widened. There was a long silence. Then, he looked at Lisa. Something changed in his posture. Lisa, he said, voice careful. They have confirmed first-class reservations. Booked under Charles Carter's corporate account. Lisa's face drained of color. Ava and Maya saw it, the briefest flicker of panic. The entire gate area was silent. Ava stepped forward, slow, deliberate. She was shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper. You saw our names, didn't you? She asked, her voice low. You saw Carter and thought, that can't be them. Lisa didn't answer. Maya kept recording. The internet was going to love this. The supervisor cleared his throat. Miss Reynolds, can I speak with you privately? It was over. Lisa knew it. But the damage was done. She had humiliated them. She had made a scene. And now, the scene was about to turn on her. Ava exhaled sharply, her throat tight. She grabbed Maya's hand. We're still getting on this flight, she said. Lisa watched them walk past, silent. Silent, for now. The moment Ava and Maya stepped onto the jet bridge, the weight of the humiliation clung to them like a second skin. The stares, the murmurs, the judgment, it all still burned, but at least they were on the plane now. Ava walked ahead, her back straight, her jaw clenched. She refused to let Lisa have the last word. Maya, however, was still fuming. As they reached their luxurious first-class seats, she flopped down with an exasperated sigh, gripping her phone tightly. This video's already blowing up, she muttered. Ava rubbed her temples. I don't even care about the video right now. She exhaled, closing her eyes. I want to get to New York and pretend this never happened. Maya's head snapped toward her. Are you serious? Her voice was sharp, indignant. That woman humiliated us, lied about us, and almost got us dragged out of the airport by security. You just wanna move on? Ava sighed, opening her eyes. What do you want me to do? Fight her right here? We won. Maya let out a dry laugh. Did we? She held up her phone. Because this right here. This isn't just about us anymore. People are talking. This is going viral. Ava grabbed Maya's phone and stared at the screen. Thousands of retweets. Comments flooding in. Sir, this is disgusting. Skyway Airlines, care to explain? This is why we need accountability in the airline industry. They wouldn't have done this to rich white girls. Let's be real. Ava swallowed hard. Her stomach twisted. It was bigger than just Lisa Reynolds now. But before she could process it, a familiar voice cut through the soft chatter of first class. Lisa. She had just stepped onto the plane. Lisa felt the heat of the glares before she even reached her section. First-class passengers were staring. Some whispering. Some outright glaring. She had handled thousands of flights in her career. Why did this one feel different? She tried to push forward, act natural. But the moment she saw Maya recording, her pulse spiked. They were still watching her. Her chest tightened as she walked past the sisters, her eyes locking with Ava's. There was no mistaking the expression on the young woman's face. Pure, simmering anger. Lisa wanted to look away, to ignore it, to pretend that she hadn't just made the biggest mistake of her career. But she couldn't. Not with the way Maya tilted her phone slightly, making sure the camera caught every step she took. Lisa clenched her teeth and forced herself forward. She was a professional. She wouldn't let two entitled girls rattle her. But then she heard it. Passengers in first class were muttering about her. That's the one. The flight attendant from the video. Unbelievable. I can't believe she's still working. They should have fired her the second that happened. Her grip on the service tablet tightened. This was spiraling. Fast. At Skyway Airlines corporate office in Manhattan, Charles Carter had just finished a high-profile meeting when his assistant rushed in, phone in hand, her face pale. Sir, you need to see this. Carter frowned, taking the phone. He wasn't a man who liked distractions. He had built an empire by keeping his head down, focusing on numbers, not noise. But the moment he saw the video, his daughters, standing in an airport, being accused of fraud by his own employee, his blood turned ice cold. "What the hell is this?" His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made his assistant shift nervously. "It, went viral about 30 minutes ago," she said carefully. "Skyway Airlines is trending worldwide. Not in a good way." Carter watched the video in silence. His daughters, standing there, being humiliated. A muscle in his jaw twitched. The moment the video ended, he turned to his assistant. "Get me the head of PR. Now." Back on the plane, the tension in first class was unbearable. Maya was still filming. Ava was still fuming. Lisa was trying to pretend like none of it was happening. But she could feel the weight of their eyes on her. Then, suddenly, a chime sounded. Lisa reached for the in-flight phone, expecting a routine message from the cockpit. Instead, the voice on the other end was tense. "Lisa Reynolds." Her grip on the phone tightened. "Yes." A pause. Then, "You need to disembark immediately." The air left Lisa's lungs. "What?" Another pause. Then, "Corporate just called. You're being removed from the flight." A ringing silence filled Lisa's ears. She turned slowly, locking eyes with Maya and Ava. Maya lifted her phone higher, her lips curling into a smirk. She had caught the moment on camera. Lisa's stomach dropped. "No. No, no, no. Not like this." A voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We are experiencing a last-minute crew change and will be underway shortly." Lisa's world tilted. She had worked for 15 years for this airline. And in a matter of 30 minutes, she was being thrown off a flight like a criminal. As she turned to leave, Maya called out, just loud enough for the other passengers to hear. "Guess they figured out who the fraud really is." A few chuckles rippled through first class. Lisa's face burned. She kept walking. But as she stepped off the plane and into the cold, fluorescent-lit terminal, her hands trembled. Because she knew, this wasn't just about a flight anymore. This was about her entire career. And she had a sinking feeling this wasn't over. Lisa Reynolds sat in a dimly lit conference room at LAX, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her entire body stiff. The door had been shut for 15 minutes now, but the silence was deafening. She could feel the weight of her career slipping through her fingers. Then, the door opened. A group of Skyway Airlines executives entered, men in expensive suits, their faces cold, unreadable. But it was the last man to walk in who made Lisa's throat tighten. Charles Carter. He closed the door behind him, took a seat at the head of the table, and placed his phone down with deliberate slowness. Lisa's breath hitched. On the screen, the paused image of Maya's video stared back at her. Millions of views. Carter leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished wood. "Recognize this scene?" Lisa swallowed hard. Her palms grew damp. She started, but her voice cracked. "I was following protocol." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Protocol?" His voice was low, dangerous. Lisa licked her lips. "Yes. Fraudulent tickets are a risk. I was protecting the integrity of the flight." Carter didn't blink, didn't move. Then, with almost chilling calm, he said, "My daughter's tickets weren't fraudulent." Lisa's stomach twisted. He let that sink in before continuing. "So, tell me, Lisa, what exactly were you protecting?" Lisa had no answer. The other executives remained silent. No one was going to save her. Carter exhaled sharply and leaned back. "You've humiliated my family, damaged my company's reputation, and given the internet exactly the kind of scandal that destroys brands." He let out a dry chuckle. "You're lucky I'm not suing you for defamation." Lisa's nails dug into her palms. She had spent years building a flawless reputation, sacrificing everything for this job. And now, in just one day, she was being erased. Fired. Disgraced. But then, something inside her snapped. She lifted her chin. "Your company ruined lives long before I embarrassed your daughters." Carter's expression didn't change. "Excuse me." Lisa's voice shook, but she didn't stop. I had a son. His name was Ethan Reynolds. He was on Skyway Flight 282 5 years ago. For the first time since walking in, Carter faltered. Lisa saw it. That brief flicker of recognition in his eyes. He remembered. Lisa's throat tightened. I know what you did. Carter sat still, too still. The room, once tense, became suffocating. One of the executives coughed nervously. Lisa, this is not the... Shut up, she snapped. Her heart pounded as she locked eyes with Carter. She needed him to say it, to admit it. But he wouldn't. So she kept going. My son died in that crash, Lisa hissed. And you let them blame it on pilot error. But I know the truth. A muscle in Carter's jaw twitched. There were maintenance reports flagging engine malfunctions weeks before that flight took off, Lisa continued. Reports that your company ignored because grounding that plane would have cost money. Carter stayed silent. Lisa let out a bitter laugh. Say something. Deny it. I dare you. The silence stretched. Then, finally, Carter exhaled. Long, slow. Measured. He reached for his phone, swiped, and then turned the screen to Lisa. A document. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a confidential internal memo. From 5 years ago. A maintenance warning. Dismissed. Lisa's head spun. He knew. He had always known. Carter's voice was barely a whisper. I can't change the past. Lisa felt her hands shake. No. But you can finally tell the damn truth. Meanwhile, on the plane, Ava and Maya sat in deep silence, first-class luxury feeling suddenly meaningless. Ava scrolled through her phone, reading comment after comment. Skyway has a history of shady cover-ups. Does anyone remember Flight 282? The families never got real answers. Wait. Carter's company had another scandal years ago. Maya leaned over. What is that? Ava's fingers tightened around her phone. Something's off. She tapped on a news link about a plane crash from 5 years ago. A small, quiet tragedy, long buried under corporate statements and legal settlements. But now, people were connecting dots. Maya's eyes widened. You think Dad, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Ava felt sick. I don't know, she admitted. But I think we need to find out. Back in the LAX conference room, Lisa had nothing left to lose. She leaned forward. Tell the world the truth, Carter. His jaw tightened. Then, to her absolute shock, he nodded. Lisa's breath hitched. You're serious? Carter exhaled, rubbing his temples. He looked tired. Older. I built this company from nothing, he muttered. I spent years making decisions that kept it alive. He looked up. And those decisions cost lives. Lisa felt a lump in her throat. Carter looked at his executives. Prepare a press statement. A full internal investigation. And a payout to every family affected by Flight 282. One of them sputtered. Sir, the board will. I don't give a damn about the board, Carter snapped. Fix it. Lisa's head spun. This was actually happening. For the first time since Ethan died, she had won. Later that evening, Ava and Maya sat in their New York apartment, watching a live press conference. Their father, standing before the media, finally speaking words he should have said years ago. I take full responsibility for the mistakes of this company, Carter said, his voice steady. And today, we begin making things right. Maya exhaled. Holy shit. Ava didn't respond. She just watched, feeling something she never thought she'd feel toward her father. Respect. Lisa, watching from her own apartment, felt something too. Ethan's name was finally spoken. His death was finally acknowledged. Tears slipped down her face, but this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of justice. The press conference ended, but the storm was just beginning. Within minutes, news outlets exploded. Skyway Airlines CEO admits company negligence led to fatal crash. Families of Flight 282 victims demand justice after shocking confession. Did Charles Carter only confess because of public pressure? Ava and Maya sat frozen in their New York apartment, their father's words still echoing in their heads. Maya broke the silence first. I don't know whether to be proud or disgusted. Ava was still staring at the screen, her mind racing. I think it's both. Their father was a master of control. He didn't just confess because it was the right thing to do. He confessed because he had no other choice. And now, the damage was irreversible. Maya exhaled sharply. People are calling for him to resign. Ava turned, studying her sister. Do you think he will? Maya scoffed. Dad, walk away from the empire he built? No chance. But deep down, neither of them were sure. Because Charles Carter had just lost control of his own narrative. Meanwhile, across the country, Lisa Reynolds sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. She had spent years fighting for this moment. For Ethan. And yet, now that it had happened, she felt empty. Her inbox was flooded with emails, journalists, activists, attorneys. People who suddenly wanted to hear her story. She could be on Good Morning America tomorrow if she wanted. But all she wanted was for her son to be alive. Lisa closed her laptop. Justice wasn't the same as closure. Her eyes drifted to the small photo on the bookshelf, Ethan's 7th birthday. The last one they celebrated together. A tear slipped down her cheek. Would he be proud of her? She hoped so. Back at Skyway Airlines headquarters, Charles Carter sat in a private boardroom, surrounded by chaos. We need to do damage control, one executive snapped. Legal is already preparing statements, but we can't undo this. We're already losing investors, another said. If we don't get ahead of this, the board will. Carter cut them off. The board will do whatever I tell them to. The room fell silent. Despite everything, Carter still commanded power. But deep down, he knew he was losing grip. His phone buzzed. Ava. For the first time in hours, Carter felt something stir in his chest, dread. He answered. Ava. Her voice was sharp. We need to talk. Not as his daughters, but as two women who just learned who their father really was. An hour later, Carter sat in his penthouse office, face to face with his daughters. Maya didn't even wait for pleasantries. How long have you known? Carter inhaled deeply. Since the day it happened. Ava felt physically ill. And you just covered it up? Carter's fingers drummed against his desk. I didn't just cover it up. I made a decision that protected this company. Maya's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. Are you even hearing yourself? Carter's jaw tightened. You think you understand business, Maya? You think you understand the pressure I was under? Ava leaned forward. We understand that you let innocent people die and lied about it. Carter's gaze darkened. You have no idea what sacrifices I've made for you. For this family. Maya laughed bitterly. Right. Because your billions were for us. Carter's silence was deafening. Ava spoke next. We don't want your money. Carter flinched. What? Maya crossed her arms. You heard her. We're out. Ava swallowed hard. You built an empire on other people's suffering. We won't be part of it. Carter felt his world shift. His own daughters, his legacy, were walking away. Meanwhile, Lisa received an unexpected phone call. A deep voice on the other end. Ms. Reynolds. My name is David Klein. I'm an attorney representing several families of Flight 282. Lisa sat up. Okay. David hesitated. We believe we have enough evidence to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Skyway Airlines. And we'd like you to be our lead witness. Lisa's breath caught. Testifying meant reopening the wound. Exposing herself. Facing Carter in court. She clenched her fist. And then, she whispered, I'm in. Lisa Reynolds stood outside the courthouse, a cold breeze cutting through the late afternoon air. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, microphones were shoved toward her face. She had spent years fighting for this moment. And now, it was here. Ms. Reynolds, how do you feel about the settlement? One reporter asked. Lisa took a breath. Careful. Steady. She had learned that words mattered. Especially today. "I think this is just the beginning," she said. And she meant it. The settlement was historic. $250 million to the families of Flight 282. But money didn't bring Ethan back. Money didn't erase the 5 years of silence, of denial, of pain. The real victory? The truth was out. Lisa turned away from the cameras and walked down the courthouse steps. For the first time in a long time, she felt lighter. Across the city, in a sleek Manhattan office, Charles Carter sat alone. The past month had torn apart everything he built. Skyway Airlines was under federal investigation. Stock prices had plummeted. The board had forced him to step down as CEO. He wasn't surprised. He had spent decades making decisions that kept his empire alive, but at what cost? The worst part? His daughters barely spoke to him now. The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Ava and Maya. They stepped inside his office, their presence unwavering. Carter exhaled. "You finally decided to see me." Ava crossed her arms. "You lied to us. 4 years." Maya's voice was colder. "And you thought we'd just forgive you?" Carter nodded slowly. He had expected this. "No," he admitted. "I didn't." Ava studied him carefully. The powerful, untouchable Charles Carter now looked defeated. Not the man who had once ruled an industry. Just a man who had lost everything that mattered. "We're not here to make peace," Maya said. Ava hesitated. Then finally she said, "But we're here to figure out who we are without you." Carter's throat tightened. He had spent his life believing he was building a legacy. But now he saw the truth. His daughters didn't want his money, his company, his power. They just wanted a father who hadn't failed them. And that, he realized, was something he could never undo. 1 month later, Lisa stood at Ethan's grave, a bouquet of white lilies in her hands. The marble headstone gleamed under the soft afternoon sun. She traced his name with her fingers, her chest tightening. "I did it, baby," she whispered. She had spent so many years drowning in grief. So many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever get justice. Now, she could finally breathe. She knelt down, pressing a hand to the cold stone. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from peace. As she stood up, she saw a familiar figure standing near the trees. Ava Carter. Lisa's breath caught. She hadn't expected to see either of the Carter sisters ever again. Ava walked forward, hesitant. I didn't mean to interrupt." Lisa shook her head. "You're not." Ava glanced at Ethan's grave. "I read about him. About what happened." She swallowed. "I'm sorry." Lisa studied the young woman in front of her. Once just the daughter of a billionaire. Now, something more. "You know," Lisa said softly, "for a long time, I thought your father was my biggest enemy." She looked back at the grave. But the real enemy was silence. Ava nodded. She understood now. Silence had allowed her father's lies to survive. Silence had buried Lisa's pain. And silence had let injustice win, until now. Lisa exhaled. "So what happens next?" Ava smiled faintly. "We stop being silent." Lisa smiled too. Maybe, just maybe, something good had come out of all this after all. Epilogue. Skyway Airlines faced massive changes. New policies. New leadership. New accountability. Charles Carter's empire survived, but he no longer ruled it. Lisa Reynolds became an advocate for airline safety. She no longer worked for Skyway, but her voice was louder than ever. And Ava and Maya. They had spent their whole lives living in their father's shadow. Now, they were finally stepping into their own light. Final line. Lisa stood outside the airport, staring at the departing planes above. This time, as she watched them fly, she wasn't haunted anymore. She was free.